No signal, no warning, just silence. On the sonar dome, dozens of deep cuts. Inside each gash, curved claws embedded in military rubber. October 1978. USS Stein, destroyer escort, returned to San Diego disabled. 8% of its sonar dome shredded. Biological hooks embedded in reinforced rubber. The Naval Ocean Systems Center filed it as unexplained damage. Biologist Frederick Wood confirmed squid origin. No species matched the size. Mechanical failure explains malfunctions. Combat explains damage. But what explains claws strong enough to tear Navy equipment designed for warfare? The USS Stein left San Diego Naval Base on a routine patrol in early October 1978. The ship was a Knox-class destroyer escort, designated D-1065, later reclassified as frigate FF-1065. It displaced 4,200 tons fully loaded. The crew numbered 245 men, 18 officers, and 227 enlisted personnel. The primary mission was anti-submarine warfare in the Eastern Pacific. Commander Harold Mitchell had commanded the Stein for 11 months. The ship was equipped with the AN/SQS-26 sonar system, one of the most powerful active sonar arrays in the United States Navy. The sonar dome protruded from the bow below the waterline. It was a bulbous structure covered in specialized rubber designated NR-196. The rubber was designed to absorb underwater shocks, resist corrosion from salt water, and protect the delicate transducer array interior. The sonar operated by sending high-powered acoustic pulses into the water. The pulses traveled through the ocean at approximately 1,500 meters per second. When the sound waves struck an object, they bounced back to the dome. The sonar operators in the Combat Information Center could then determine the range, bearing, and speed of submarines or surface contacts. The system could detect targets at ranges exceeding 20 nautical miles under ideal conditions. On October 18th, Petty Officer Second Class Robert Henderson was on duty in the sonar compartment. He had operated the AN/SQS-26 system for 2 years. At 0300 hours, he noticed degradation in the sonar return. The display showed excessive noise. The signal clarity dropped by 30%. Henderson adjusted the gain controls. The noise remained. He switched frequencies. The interference persisted across multiple bands. Henderson reported the malfunction to Lieutenant James Patterson, the operations officer. Patterson reviewed the system logs. There were no error codes, no mechanical alarms. The sonar was transmitting pulses normally, but the return signal was distorted. Patterson ordered a diagnostic check. The internal electronics tested within normal parameters. The problem was not inside the ship. By 0600 hours, the sonar was operating at less than 50% efficiency. Commander Mitchell reviewed the situation with his department heads in the wardroom. Chief Engineer David Morrison suggested the dome might have sustained impact damage from floating debris. Lieutenant Commander William Sullivan, the executive officer, noted they had transited through a shipping lane 2 days prior. Drifting cargo containers were a known hazard in that region. Mitchell made the decision to abort the patrol and return to San Diego for inspection. A destroyer escort without functional sonar was tactically blind in submarine warfare. The Stein turned east and increased speed to 18 knots. The transit took 14 hours. On October 19th, the Stein entered San Diego Harbor and proceeded to Naval Station San Diego. The ship was scheduled for dry dock inspection the following morning. At 0800 hours on October 20th, tugboats guided the Stein into dry dock number 3. Pumps drained approximately 12 million gallons of water from the dock over 6 hours. By 1400 hours, the hull was exposed. Seaman Thomas Cooper was part of the hull inspection team. He descended the ladder into the dry dock and walked along the starboard side. The hull plates were coated in marine growth, barnacles, and algae. Cooper reached the bow section. The sonar dome protruded 4 meters below the keel line. It was 9 meters in diameter. Cooper approached with a handheld light. The surface of the dome was covered in cuts. deep parallel gouges ran across the rubber. Some cuts were 30 centimeters long. Others formed clusters of shorter marks. Cooper counted over 90 visible lacerations in the first quadrant alone. He radioed Chief Morrison. Morrison descended into the dock with Lieutenant Patterson. Morrison examined the cuts with a flashlight. The rubber was torn through to the fiberglass backing in several places. The edges of the cuts were ragged, not clean. Morrison ran his gloved hand across one of the deeper gouges. Something white was embedded in the rubber. He pulled at it. A curved object came free. It was a hook-shaped structure, approximately 4 centimeters long, with a sharp, pointed tip. Patterson looked closer. There were more hooks embedded throughout the damaged area. Morrison extracted 6 more samples. Each hook was slightly different in size, but identical in shape. They were translucent white with a hardened texture. Morrison placed the samples in a collection bag. He marked the location on a hull diagram. The inspection team spent 3 hours mapping the damage. 8% of the total dome surface had been cut or torn. The pattern was consistent with abrasion from multiple sharp objects striking the dome repeatedly. But the location and density of the marks ruled out common causes. Propeller strikes left spiral patterns. Coral reefs created linear scrapes with embedded fragments. Anchor chains produced deep single cuts. This damage pattern did not match any standard classification. Commander Mitchell reviewed the inspection photos in his stateroom that evening. The cuts covered the forward and lateral sections of the dome. The aft section showed minimal damage. Mitchell noted that the forward section would have been the first part of the dome to encounter any obstruction. If the ship had struck debris, the damage should have been localized to a single impact point. Instead, the cuts were distributed across multiple areas. The following morning, the Naval Ocean Systems Center in San Diego dispatched a technical team to examine the dome. The team leader was Dr. Frederick Wood, a marine biologist specializing in deep-sea organisms. Wood had spent 12 years studying cephalopods, particularly large squid species. He arrived at the dry dock at 0900 hours on October 21st. Wood examined the embedded hooks under a portable microscope. He identified them immediately as squid tentacle hooks, specifically the chitinous structures found on the suckers of certain squid species. Squid in the family Onychoteuthidea possess sharp hooks instead of suction cup teeth. The hooks are used to grip prey during feeding. Wood measured the samples. The largest hook was 4.3 centimeters in length. He compared the measurements to reference specimens from known squid species. The giant squid, Architeuthis dux, typically had hooks ranging from 1 to 2 centimeters. The colossal squid, Mesonychoteuthis hamiltoni, had larger hooks, averaging 3 centimeters in mature specimens. The hooks from the Stein exceeded all documented measurements. Wood examined the distribution pattern of the cuts on the dome. The marks suggested the squid had wrapped its tentacles around the structure. Squid hunt by extending their feeding tentacles rapidly to capture prey. Once contact is made, the tentacles retract and pull the prey toward the 8 shorter arms. The arms then constrict around the prey while the beak tears flesh. The damage pattern on the Stein was consistent with a constriction attempt. Wood drafted a preliminary report that afternoon. He noted that the AN/SQS-26 sonar operated at frequencies between 3 and 4 kHz. Certain marine mammals and large fish were known to react to active sonar pulses. Some species mistook the pulses for biological echolocation signals. Squid possessed advanced nervous systems and sophisticated sensory organs. It was plausible that the sonar pulses had triggered an aggressive response, but the scale remained unexplained. Wood calculated that a squid large enough to leave hooks of this size would have a mantle length of at least 4 meters. The tentacles could extend an additional 8 to 10 meters. Total length would approach 14 meters. No squid of that size had been captured or reliably documented in the Eastern Pacific. The largest confirmed Architeuthis specimen measured 13 meters total length, captured off New Zealand in 1987, 9 years in the future. Wood submitted his report to the Naval Ocean Systems Center on October 23rd. The report classified the incident as biological interaction with unknown cephalopod species. Wood recommended further analysis of the hooks and consultation with specialists in deep-sea biology. The report concluded that the sonar system had likely attracted or provoked the animal. The Stein had been operating in waters exceeding 3,000 meters depth. At that depth, the diversity of large predatory species remained poorly understood. Commander Mitchell read the report in his quarters. The Navy had built the Stein to hunt Soviet submarines. The ship carried torpedoes, depth charges, and anti-submarine rockets. It had survived sea trials in the North Atlantic and patrols off the Aleutian Islands. Now it sat in dry dock, disabled by an animal. The sonar dome was stripped and replaced over the next 2 weeks. The damaged rubber sections were removed and sent to a naval research facility for archival storage. The hooks were preserved in alcohol solution and catalogued. The Stein returned to active service on November 6, 1978. The official maintenance log recorded the cause of damage as interaction with marine organism, species unidentified. But the question remained in the reports filed at the Naval Ocean Systems Center. Something in the deep Pacific had mistaken a destroyer escort for prey. Something with tentacles strong enough to grip reinforced rubber. Something with hooks large enough to tear through military-grade material designed to withstand depth-charge concussions. The Stein carried 245 men into waters where the ocean floor dropped beyond sonar range. And somewhere in that darkness, something had reached up and tried to pull the ship down. Dr. Wood sent samples of the hooks to 3 additional research institutions in November 1978. The Scripps Institution of Oceanography in La Jolla received 2 specimens. The Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington received 3. Woods Hole, Oceanographic Institution in Massachusetts received 2. Wood requested independent analysis and species identification. Dr. Margaret Chen at Scripps examined the hooks under electron microscopy on November 12th. She documented the microstructure of the chitin. The hooks showed growth rings similar to tree rings. Chen counted 17 distinct rings in the largest specimen. If each ring represented 1 year of growth, the animal was at least 17 years old. But the correlation between ring count and age in deep sea squid remained uncertain. Some species grew rapidly in cold water. Others took decades to reach maturity. Chen compared the hook morphology to specimens in the Scripps collection. The museum held over 400 preserved squid specimens from Pacific expeditions dating back to 1923. The largest hooks in the collection came from an Architeuthis caught off California in 1956. Those hooks measured 2.8 centimeters. The Stein hooks were 53% larger. Chen drafted a memo to Wood on November 18th. She noted that hook size scaled with body mass in cephalopods. Using allometric equations from published literature, she estimated the Stein squid had a total mass between 400 and 600 kilograms. A squid of that mass would require a hunting territory spanning hundreds of square kilometers. It would need to consume approximately 10 to 15 kilograms of prey per day to maintain metabolic functions. The memo raised a secondary question. Why would an animal of that size attack a steel hull? Squid were opportunistic predators. They fed on fish, crustaceans, and smaller squid. Some species scavenged whale carcasses, but attacking a moving ship demonstrated behavior inconsistent with known feeding patterns. Chen suggested the sonar might have interfered with the squid's own bioelectric field. Some cephalopods used electroreception to navigate in total darkness. A powerful sonar pulse could have disoriented the animal or caused pain. At Woods Hole, Dr. Thomas Bradford conducted chemical analysis of the hooks in late November. He dissolved a small fragment in hydrochloric acid and ran spectrometry tests. The chitin contained trace amounts of copper, iron, and calcium. The copper concentration was notably high, measuring 68 parts per million. Copper served as the oxygen-carrying molecule in squid blood, analogous to iron in human hemoglobin. High copper suggested the animal lived in a low-oxygen environment, where efficient oxygen transport was critical. Bradford cross-referenced the copper levels with oceanographic data from the Eastern Pacific. Waters below 2,000 meters depth contained dissolved oxygen concentrations below 2 milliliters per liter. Squid adapted to these conditions developed larger gills and higher blood copper. Bradford's analysis indicated the Stein squid was a deep water resident, likely living between 2,000 and 3,000 meters depth. The Smithsonian received Wood's samples on November 15th. Dr. Richard Keller, curator of invertebrate zoology, compared the hooks to specimens collected during the Challenger expedition of 1872 to 1876. The Challenger had dredged samples from ocean trenches across the globe. Among the preserved specimens were hooks from an unknown squid species caught at a depth of 4,200 meters near the Mariana Trench. Keller examined the Challenger hooks under magnification. They measured 3.6 centimeters in length. The curvature and serration pattern closely matched the Stein hooks. Keller wrote to Wood on December 2nd. He stated that the Stein squid might belong to the same species or family as the Challenger specimen. If so, the animal represented a deep trench predator rarely encountered at shallower depths. But Keller noted a discrepancy in the data. The Challenger specimen had been caught in a net at depth. It was dead when recovered. The Stein squid had actively attacked a moving vessel at the surface. Keller asked Wood a direct question in his letter. Had the Stein been operating near any underwater canyons or trench systems when the sonar failed? Wood reviewed the Stein's navigation logs from October 17th and 18th. The ship had been patrolling southwest of San Diego at coordinates 32 degrees north, 119 degrees west. That position placed the Stein directly above the San Diego Trough, an underwater canyon system extending from the continental shelf down to 3,600 meters depth. The trough was a known migration route for deep-sea species moving between the abyssal plain and the coastal shelf. Wood added this detail to his revised report in December. The timing suggested the squid had been migrating upward when it encountered the Stein. Vertical migrations were common in deep-sea organisms. Many species rose toward the surface at night to feed in plankton-rich waters, then descended at dawn to avoid predators and warm temperatures. The Stein's sonar would have been most active during night patrols when submarine detection was prioritized. Wood hypothesized that the squid had mistaken the sonar pulses for the echolocation clicks of a sperm whale. Sperm whales were the primary predators of giant squid. The whales hunted at depths exceeding 2,000 meters, using biosonar to locate prey in total darkness. A frightened or aggressive squid might attack the source of the clicks preemptively. But the hypothesis contained a flaw. Sperm whale clicks ranged from 200 Hz to 32 kHz, with most energy concentrated between 2 and 16 kHz. The AN/SQS-26 sonar operated at a narrow band between 3 and 4 kHz. The frequency overlap was minimal. Wood could not explain why the squid would confuse a steady sonar ping with the irregular, rapid-fire clicks of a hunting whale. Commander Mitchell received a copy of Wood's revised report on December 8th. He read the section on sperm whale predation. Mitchell had served on destroyers for 18 years. He had crossed the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and the Pacific. He had tracked Soviet submarines through the Barents Sea. He had never encountered anything that attacked his ship without provocation. The Stein had not fired weapons. It had not dropped depth charges. It had only transmitted sound into the water. Mitchell filed the report in his personal log and locked the cabinet. The Stein was operational again. The new sonar dome performed without issue during sea trials in December. The crew never spoke about the incident, but when the sonar was active at night, some men refused to stand watch near the bow. They said the sound carried through the hull. They said it sounded like knocking. On December 20th, Wood received a package from the Smithsonian. Inside was a photograph of the Challenger specimen. The image showed a hook mounted on a glass slide with a measurement scale. Wood compared it to his photographs of the Stein hooks. The curvature matched. The serrations matched. The size was within 10% variance. Wood placed both photographs side by side on his desk. One specimen from 1876, one from 1978, 102 years apart. The same species, the same ocean, the same hooks designed to hold prey that fought back. Wood closed the file and sealed it. The Navy had classified the Stein incident as equipment malfunction in the official fleet records. The biological analysis remained archived at the Naval Ocean Systems Center, accessible only to personnel with security clearance. But the hooks were still stored in the research vault, and somewhere in the San Diego Trough, 3,000 meters below the surface, something was still hunting. In January 1979, Wood attended a marine biology conference in Seattle. During a session on deep-sea predation, he presented the Stein case to a closed group of Navy consultants and academic researchers. He displayed photographs of the damaged dome and enlarged images of the hooks. The presentation lasted 40 minutes. Wood concluded by stating that the incident represented the first documented physical interaction between a large deep-sea cephalopod and a military vessel. After the presentation, Dr. Alan Hughes from the University of Washington approached Wood. Hughes specialized in cephalopod behavior and had published papers on aggression in Humboldt squid. He asked Wood if the Navy had considered alternative explanations for the damage. Wood replied that all mechanical and collision scenarios had been eliminated during the dry dock inspection. Hughes nodded. Then he asked a different question. Had anyone checked if other ships reported similar damage? Wood had not investigated that angle. The Stein incident had been treated as an isolated event. Hughes suggested Wood contact the Naval Sea Systems Command and request maintenance records for other vessels equipped with the AN/SQS-26 sonar. If the Stein was not unique, the pattern would indicate a systemic interaction between sonar-equipped ships and deep-sea fauna. Wood submitted the request on January 15th. The Naval Sea Systems Command responded on February 3rd. The response included a summary document listing 7 destroyer escorts and frigates that had reported sonar dome damage between 1972 and 1978. The ships were USS Knox, USS Rourke, USS Gray, USS Hepburn, USS Connell, USS Rathburn, and USS Stein. All were Knox-class vessels equipped with identical sonar systems. Wood reviewed the summary document. The damage descriptions varied. USS Knox reported abrasion and loss of rubber coating in 1973. USS Rourke reported surface cuts in 1974. USS Gray reported embedded foreign material in 1975. USS Hepburn reported degradation of dome integrity in 1976. USS Connell and USS Rathburn both reported surface damage in 1977. Only the Stein report explicitly mentioned biological material. Wood requested the full maintenance files for each ship. The files arrived in March. Wood examined them individually. The Knox file contained photographs of the damaged dome. The rubber showed parallel scratches similar to the Stein pattern, but less severe. No samples were collected. The damage was attributed to contact with floating debris. The Rourke file included a memo from the ship's chief engineer. The memo stated that the dome had been inspected after sonar performance degradation. Cuts were found on the forward section. The engineer noted that the cuts appeared too regular to result from random debris impact. No biological analysis was conducted. The dome was replaced. The Gray file contained a photograph of the dome surface. Wood examined the image closely. Small white fragments were visible in several cuts. The maintenance report described them as calcium deposits from barnacle attachment. But Wood recognized the shape. They were hook fragments. The Gray had encountered the same species as the Stein. Wood called Dr. Hughes on March 23rd. He described the maintenance records. Hughes listened without interrupting. When Wood finished, Hughes asked how many Knox-class ships were in active service. Wood checked the fleet registry. There were 46 Knox-class vessels operating in the Atlantic and Pacific between 1972 and 1979. 7 ships had reported dome damage. That represented 15% of the class. Hughes asked Wood if the Navy had issued any operational guidelines regarding sonar use in deep water. Wood checked the tactical manuals. There were no restrictions on sonar operation by depth. The AN/SQS-26 was designed for open ocean anti-submarine warfare. It was intended to operate at maximum power in all environments. Hughes suggested the Squid attacks were defensive responses to acoustic harassment. The sonar operated at frequencies and decibel levels far exceeding natural ocean sounds. A squid migrating through the water column would encounter the pulses as a sudden, painful intrusion. The animal would instinctively attack the source. Hughes compared it to a human swatting at a mosquito. The size difference was irrelevant. The response was automatic. Wood found the explanation plausible but incomplete. It explained why a squid would attack. It did not explain why only 15% of NOx-class ships reported damage. If the sonar triggered automatic defensive responses, every ship operating in deep water should have encountered attacks. The fact that most ships experienced no incidents suggested additional variables. Wood returned to the navigation logs. He plotted the positions where each damaged ship had been operating when sonar degradation was first noticed. USS Knox had been southwest of the Azores. USS Rourke had been west of the Mariana Trench. USS Gray had been near the Peru-Chile Trench. USS Hepburn had been off the Aleutian Trench. USS Connolly had been near the Cayman Trench. USS Rathburn had been over the Puerto Rico Trench. USS Stein had been above the San Diego Trough. Every ship had been operating directly above or adjacent to a major underwater trench system. The trenches ranged in depth from 3,000 to over 8,000 meters. Wood marked each location on a Pacific Ocean map. The incidents formed a pattern. Ships crossing trench zones experienced attacks. Ships operating over continental shelves or mid-ocean ridges did not. Wood added this analysis to his research file on March 30th. The pattern indicated that the attacking squids were trench-dwelling species that rose toward the surface during feeding migrations. When the squids encountered active sonar during their ascent, they responded aggressively. The sonar domes, protruding from the bow and emitting intense sound, became the focus of the attack. But one detail remained unexplained. Why did the squids continue attacking long enough to cause severe damage? Squid were intelligent animals. They could distinguish between living prey and inanimate objects. A few tentacle strikes should have been sufficient to determine that the dome was not food. Yet the Stein dome showed evidence of prolonged, repeated contact. The squid had not released the dome quickly. It had held on. Wood examined the photographs again. The distribution of cuts suggested the squid had wrapped at least 2 tentacles around the dome in a constriction grip. That behavior was consistent with prey capture, not defensive striking. Wood checked the sonar specifications. The AN/SQS-26 emitted pulses at 195 decibels at 1 meter distance. At close range, the sound pressure was intense enough to cause tissue damage in marine mammals. Wood hypothesized that once the squid made contact with the dome, the sonar pulse at point-blank range caused physical pain or disorientation. The squid would instinctively constrict harder, attempting to crush or disable the source. The hooks would embed in the rubber. The tentacles would pull. The animal would not release until it exhausted itself or until the dome surface became too damaged to grip effectively. Wood documented this hypothesis in his final report, completed on April 9, 1979. The report concluded that the USS Stein incident represented aggressive defensive behavior by a large deep-water squid provoked by high-intensity sonar. Wood recommended that the Navy consider modifying sonar operating procedures in trench zones, particularly during night hours when vertical migrations were most active. He also recommended that maintenance crews be trained to recognize and preserve biological material found on damaged equipment. The report was filed at the Naval Ocean Systems Center under restricted access. Wood received no response from Navy Command regarding operational changes. The Knox-class ships continued patrolling with standard sonar protocols. No public announcement was made about the biological nature of the dome damage. In May 1979, Wood received a letter from Dr. Keller at the Smithsonian. Keller had been reviewing archived specimens from 19th century expeditions. He had found a journal entry from the HMS Challenger expedition, dated March 1876. The entry described an incident near the Kermadec Trench, where the ship's hull had been struck repeatedly during the night. The crew heard scraping sounds along the keel. In the morning, they found deep scratches on the copper plating below the waterline. The Challenger's naturalist had attributed the damage to a large sea creature, possibly a squid, but no physical evidence was recovered. The incident was recorded as unexplained contact with marine organism. Keller noted that the Challenger had been conducting deep water dredging in the trench at the time. The dredge nets had been equipped with metal frames that clanged and vibrated as they descended. Wood read the letter twice. The Challenger incident occurred 103 years before the Stein encounter. Different ship, different technology, same trench environment, same type of damage. The squids had been reacting to human noise in the deep ocean for over a century. Wood filed Keller's letter with the Stein documentation. Then he locked the cabinet and walked out of his office. The hooks were in storage, the reports were archived. The Stein was back at sea, sonar operational, hunting submarines in waters where other things were hunting too. But there was one document Wood had not included in the official files. It was a maintenance note from USS Stein, dated November 14, 1978, 8 days after the ship returned to service. The note stated that sonar technicians had reported an anomaly during a routine systems check. At a depth setting of 3,000 meters, the sonar had detected a large biological contact approximately 600 meters below the keel. The contact remained stationary for 4 minutes, then descended rapidly beyond detection range. The technicians logged the contact as probable whale, but the size estimate exceeded any known whale species, and the depth was wrong. Sperm whales rarely descended below 2,000 meters for extended periods. The contact had been holding position at 3,000 meters when detected. Wood kept the note in his personal files. He never added it to the official record, because if the contact was not a whale, then the Stein had found what attacked it, and it was still out there, still hunting, still responding to sound in the dark. The facts are not disputed. On October 18, 1978, USS Stein experienced sonar failure while patrolling above the San Diego Trough. 2 days later, the ship was in dry dock. 8% of the sonar dome was damaged. Dozens of biological hooks were embedded in the rubber. Laboratory analysis confirmed squid origin with hook sizes exceeding all known species. The most consistent explanation is acoustic provocation, followed by defensive aggression. The Stein was operating at night over a deep water trench when a large squid, likely migrating upward to feed, encountered the ship's active sonar. The AN/SQS-26 emitted pulses at 195 decibels. At that intensity, the sound would have been painful or disorienting to a cephalopod with sensitive neural tissue. The squid responded instinctively by attacking the source. It wrapped tentacles around the sonar dome and constricted. The hooks embedded in the rubber as the animal tried to crush or disable the perceived threat. The squid held on until the continued sonar pulses at point-blank range caused enough pain or exhaustion to force release. The evidence from 7 Knox-class ships supports this interpretation. Every damaged vessel was operating over or near major trench systems when sonar degradation occurred. The squids were deep water residents between 2,000 and 3,500 meters depth that rose toward the surface during nocturnal feeding migrations. The timing and location of attacks correlate with known migration patterns of large deep-sea predators. Dr. Wood submitted operational recommendations to the Naval Ocean Systems Command in April 1979. He proposed restricting high-power sonar use in trench zones during night hours. He recommended that maintenance crews receive training in biological specimen preservation. He suggested that future incidents be documented with full photographic and sample collection protocols. None of the recommendations were implemented. the Navy did not modify sonar operating procedures. No training programs were established. The official fleet maintenance logs continued to classify dome damage as mechanical failure or debris contact. Commander Mitchell retired from active duty in 1982. The USS Stein was decommissioned in 1992 after 26 years of service. The sonar dome was replaced 4 times during the ship's operational life. Only the 1978 replacement was documented as biological damage. The hooks remained in storage at the Naval Ocean Systems Center until the facility was reorganized in 1997. The specimens were transferred to the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, where they remain catalogued as unidentified cephalopod material from Eastern Pacific, depth unknown. Dr. Wood published a paper on the incident in 1984 in the Journal of Marine Biology. The paper detailed the hook analysis and size estimates. It concluded that a previously unknown species of large deep water squid had attacked USS Stein in response to sonar harassment. The paper received limited attention in the scientific community. No follow-up studies were conducted. No additional specimens were collected. The species remains unidentified and undocumented beyond the physical evidence left on a Navy destroyer. The Stein incident proved that deep-sea cephalopods could and would attack ships equipped with high-power sonar. It provided physical evidence of interactions between military technology and trench-dwelling predators. It demonstrated that existing operational protocols did not account for biological responses to acoustic pollution in deep-water environments. But the incident changed nothing. 46 NOx-class ships continued operating with identical sonar systems in identical environments. No warnings were issued. No protocols were modified. The Navy prioritized submarine detection over biological impact. The mission parameters remained unchanged. Technology continued operating at maximum power in waters where the consequences of that power were documented, measured, and archived. 7 ships were damaged between 1972 and 1978. The pattern was clear, the cause was confirmed, the recommendations were filed, and the sonar kept transmitting into the deep. Why did documented evidence fail to change operational procedures in trench zones?